Warning: if someone wearing a mask stops you at night and asks a simple question, do not answer immediately. Episode 5, Kuchisake-onna. In the late 1970s, panic spread across multiple regions of Japan. Schools dismissed children early. Police increased patrols. Parents warned their sons and daughters not to walk home alone. The reason was not a serial killer, not a known criminal. It was something far stranger. Witnesses described a tall woman wearing a surgical mask, standing alone on dimly lit streets at dusk. She would approach quietly, calmly, politely, and then she would ask one question: "Watashi, kairei, am I beautiful?" At first, it seemed like an urban legend, born from rumor and hysteria. But reports were disturbingly consistent. The woman was described as unusually tall, with long, straight black hair, pale skin, and a trench coat that concealed most of her body. She appeared ordinary until she removed the mask, according to those who claimed to survive the encounter. Beneath the fabric was a grotesque mutilation, her mouth sliced from ear to ear, stretched into a permanent, inhuman smile. If you answered no, she would kill you immediately. If you answered yes, she would remove the mask and ask again, "How about now?" And no matter what you answered the second time, you would not escape. But here is what makes this case different from simple folklore. In 1979, newspapers across Japan reported children being chased by a masked woman. Teachers formed escort groups to walk students home. Police patrol cars broadcast warnings. The hysteria was so intense that some schools canceled after-school activities entirely. Officially, authorities dismissed it as rumor-fueled paranoia, but they never fully explained why emergency response units were dispatched in certain districts after multiple masked woman sightings were reported. Within minutes of each other, witness statements collected years later reveal patterns rarely discussed publicly. The woman did not run at first. She walked slowly, matching the victim's pace. If you tried to ignore her, she would repeat the question in a softer voice. If you attempted to flee, she would appear ahead of you at the next intersection. Some survivors claim she carried scissors, large tailoring shears hidden beneath her coat. Others insist she never physically touched them. Instead, they describe something worse, a paralysis that set in when she removed the mask. A moment where the world felt muted, air heavy, sound distant, as if the encounter did not fully exist in physical space. One archived police interview from Gifu Prefecture describes a teenage boy who answered yes the first time. When she removed the mask and asked again, he panicked and said no. He claimed the woman tilted her head slightly and said, "You lied." The next memory he had was waking up in an alley with scratches along his cheeks, symmetrical, as if something sharp had traced the outline of a smile without fully cutting. He survived, but he refused to leave his home after sunset for months. Folklorists trace the legend back further, to the Edo period, where tales of a samurai's unfaithful wife, punished by having her mouth slit, appear in regional stories. But the modern wave feels different, more urban, more adaptive, because the legend evolved with time. In the 2000s, sightings shifted locations. Subway stations, public restrooms, residential neighborhoods, and the description changed slightly. Instead of a surgical mask, sometimes she wore a scarf, sometimes a medical face covering during flu season. She blended into whatever era she inhabited. That adaptability is what makes Kuchisake-onna terrifying. She does not appear ancient, she appears current. And in 2020, during widespread mask usage across the globe, Japanese social media saw a resurgence of posts warning children about strangers asking unsettling questions at night. Most were dismissed as hoaxes, but one security camera clip circulated briefly before being removed. The footage, timestamped 2:14 a.m., shows a quiet suburban street. A lone pedestrian walking under dim streetlights. A tall figure stands near a vending machine, masked. Still, the pedestrian slows. The two appear to exchange words. The camera has no audio, but after several seconds, the masked figure raises both hands to her face. The pedestrian freezes, and then the footage glitches. When it resumes, the street is empty. No bodies, no struggle, just silence. Authorities labeled the clip digitally altered, yet no one publicly identified the pedestrian. No missing persons report was linked. The clip vanished, but the pattern remained. Investigators studying urban legends note that Kuchisake-onna encounters often clustered during transitional hours, dusk, or late night in liminal spaces, intersections, bridges, quiet residential blocks, places between destinations, places where you are neither fully arrived nor fully gone. And the question she asks is psychologically precise. Am I beautiful? It forces engagement. It requires acknowledgement. You cannot ignore it without seeming rude. You cannot answer safely, because every response binds you to the interaction. Some survival strategies circulate online. Answer ambiguously. Say, "You're average." Throw candy and run. Ask her a question back. But these feel like desperate attempts to rationalize something irrational. Because consistent among testimonies is one detail. She appears closer than expected, even if she was across the street seconds earlier. Even if you turned the corner. Even if you ran. The most disturbing archived account comes from a retired patrol officer who spoke anonymously in 2008. He described responding to multiple masked woman calls during the 1979 panic. One night, he claims he saw her himself, standing under a flickering street lamp, masked, motionless. He approached cautiously, asked if she needed assistance. She turned toward him slowly and asked the question. He laughed nervously, said yes. She removed the mask. He expected gore. Instead, he described something worse. The cut across her mouth was too clean, too symmetrical, as if surgically precise, and her eyes did not blink. He could not remember how the encounter ended, only that he found himself sitting in his patrol car minutes later, engine running, alone. No woman in sight, no dispatch record of the call. The official report for that shift shows no anomalies, but the officer resigned 2 months later. Urban legends often fade. They lose relevance. They remain stories told at sleepovers, but Kuchisake-onna persists. She adapts. And perhaps the most chilling aspect is this. She does not demand belief. She only demands an answer. And once you respond, you become part of the narrative. Because the legend thrives on participation, on interaction, on that split-second decision when someone masked steps into your path and asks something deceptively simple. If she were merely a ghost, she would haunt a location. If she were merely a killer, she would leave physical evidence. But she is something in between. A question that walks, a presence that approaches, a test disguised as politeness. And somewhere, in a quiet Japanese neighborhood after midnight, under cold fluorescent light, a tall woman may be standing still, waiting. Not for violence, not for chaos, just for someone to answer. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Have you ever heard of Kuchisake-onna, the slit-mouthed woman? This isn't just a ghost story, whispered in the dark. It's an urban legend that has terrified Japan for decades, causing real-life panic. It all started in the late 1970s. Imagine this. A woman, her face hidden behind a surgical mask, a common sight in Japan, approaches a lone child on their way home from school. She stops them, her eyes barely visible over the mask, and asks a chillingly simple question. Am I pretty? If the child says no, the outcome is swift and brutal. She pulls out a massive pair of scissors and ends their life right there. But saying yes doesn't save you. In fact, it might be even worse. If you answer yes, she slowly lowers her mask, revealing a grotesque smile carved from ear to ear, her mouth a gaping, bloody wound. Then, she asks again, her voice now a horrifying rasp. How about now? Your answer at this point seals your fate. Saying no means you're cut in half. Saying yes means she takes her scissors and carves the same horrifying smile onto your own face, so you can be pretty, just like her. There's no escape. She's unnaturally fast. You can't outrun her. She'll appear in front of you no matter which way you turn. So where did this terrifying figure come from? The most popular origin story takes us back to Japan's Heian period, about 1,000 years ago. It tells of a stunningly beautiful but incredibly vain woman, the wife or concubine of a powerful samurai. She was unfaithful, and when her husband discovered her betrayal, his rage was absolute. In a fit of jealousy, he took his sword and slit her mouth from ear to ear, screaming, "Who will think you're beautiful now?" Cursed and filled with vengeful rage, her spirit, her Anru, now roams the earth, forever seeking to validate her broken beauty and inflict her pain on others. Another version of the legend is more modern, placing her origins in the 20th century. Some say she was the victim of a botched dental or cosmetic surgery, the surgeon's hand slipping and leaving her permanently disfigured. The pain and humiliation drove her insane, leading her to escape the hospital and begin her reign of terror. Others whisper she was in a horrific car accident that mutilated her face. Or maybe she was an inmate in a mental asylum who carved her own mouth into a smile before escaping to prey on the innocent. Regardless of her origin, the panic she caused was very real. In 1979, the legend spread like wildfire across Japan. It wasn't just a story. People truly believed she was real. Schools started sending children home in groups, escorted by teachers for safety. Police patrols were increased, especially in the evenings. The country was gripped by a mass hysteria. A woman in Himeji was even arrested for dressing up as Kuchisake-onna, as a prank. That's how seriously people took the threat. The fear was tangible. Every woman in a surgical mask became a potential monster. Every deserted street felt like her hunting ground. The legend eventually quieted down, but it never truly went away. It resurfaced in the early 2000s, this time with a new twist for a new generation. The rules of the encounter had changed. There were now potential ways to survive. The legend had evolved, offering a sliver of hope against this unstoppable force. So, what do you do if you find yourself face to face with the slit-mouthed woman? How do you survive the impossible question? According to the modern folklore, confusing her is your best bet. When she asks, "Am I pretty?" don't say yes or no. Give her a non-committal, ambiguous answer. Say something like, "You look average," or so-so. This apparently throws her into a state of confusion, giving you just enough time to make a run for it. Another survival tactic involves money or candy. If you throw a handful of coins or hard candies, particularly the traditional Japanese Bekkawane candy, on the ground, she'll supposedly be compelled to stop and pick up every single one. This again buys you precious seconds to escape her grasp. Why candy? Some believe it reminds her of a happier time, a simple pleasure from before her tragic fate, momentarily distracting her from her rage. There's also a theory that she has a specific aversion. If you chant the word pomade 3 times, it's said to repel her. The story behind this is that the cosmetic surgeon or dentist who disfigured her had hair slicked back with an overwhelming amount of waxy pomade. The smell is a powerful trigger, a traumatic reminder of her mutilation, and she flee to escape it. These new rules transformed the legend from a story of certain death into a terrifying game of wits. It became a test of quick thinking under extreme pressure. Can you remember the right thing to say or do when her cold eyes are locked on you and her scissors are gleaming in the moonlight? It's a fascinating evolution, showing how urban legends adapt to our need for some semblance of control in the face of absolute terror. But here's the most unsettling part of the Kuchisake-onna legend. It taps into very deep, very real societal fears. Fears about beauty standards, about stranger danger, about the loss of identity. In Japan, wearing a surgical mask is a common courtesy when you're sick. It's a sign of social responsibility. The legend takes this everyday object, this symbol of care, and twists it into a mask for a monster. It turns a familiar, comforting sight into a source of pure dread. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if she's not just a story? What if the legend is a warning, a reflection of the darkness that can hide behind an ordinary face? The next time you're walking alone at night and you see a figure in the distance, A woman wearing a surgical mask. What will you do? Will you cross the street? Will you quicken your pace? Or will you hold your breath and wait, listening for the quiet, terrible question whispered on the wind? Am I pretty? The story of Kuchisake-onna has endured for a reason. It's more than just a jump scare. It's a perfectly crafted piece of psychological horror that plays on our deepest anxieties. It reminds us that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look almost human. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into one of Japan's most frightening legends, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the dark. Stay safe out there. Warning, this is the part most documentaries refuse to talk about. By the time the panic reached its peak in Japan during the late 1970s, authorities were no longer just dealing with frightened school children, they were managing controlled fear. Entire districts reported coordinated sightings of a masked woman loitering near parks, bridges, and narrow residential streets just before dusk, always alone, always still, never speaking first unless approached or noticed. And the strangest detail documented in archived local reports was that dogs would not bark at her. They would whine, pull back, or lie flat against the ground, as if recognizing something that humans could not see. And when questioned later, many of the children who claimed to survive encounters described something even more disturbing than the slit mouth. The eyes, they said, were not angry, not wild, not demonic, but calm, observant, almost clinical, like someone examining an object before deciding what to do with it. Folklorists tracing the roots of Kuchisake-onna found earlier fragments of similar mutilated female spirits in Edo period ghost stories. But none carried the structured question ritual that defines her modern form, which has led some researchers to believe that the entity did not begin as folklore, but as an incident, one violent, personal act of disfigurement that mutated into myth through repetition, because trauma spreads through storytelling. And Japan in the post-war era was a country balancing tradition with rapid modernization, rigid beauty standards colliding with growing social pressure. Surgical masks becoming common during flu seasons, anonymity blending into urban density. She fits too perfectly into that psychological landscape to feel accidental. A widely circulated rumor claims she was once the wife of a samurai who mutilated her out of jealousy, carving her smile so no one else would find her beautiful. But historians dismiss this as retroactive myth-building, since surgical precision described in modern accounts resembles something far more contemporary than a blade from feudal times. And then there are darker whisper stories shared quietly in online forums by users who claim relatives worked in psychiatric institutions in the 1960s, facilities where experimental facial reconstruction procedures allegedly went wrong, leaving patients disfigured beyond repair. Women hidden from public view to avoid scandal, their identities erased. These claims remain unverified, yet the pattern of a silenced woman returning with a forced question about beauty feels symbolic, almost accusatory. During one alleged 1981 police interview, a middle school girl described answering yes to the masked woman and being asked again after the reveal. But instead of screaming, she froze, stating that the slit mouth appeared to widen unnaturally, stretching beyond physical limits, and for a split second she saw not torn flesh, but darkness inside, as if the cut was not a wound, but an opening. She survived only because a car's headlights flooded the street, and when officers searched the area minutes later, there was no sign of anyone running away. No footprints, no blood, nothing, just the echo of the question lingering in her memory. Paranormal investigators decades later began theorizing that Kuchisake-onna behaves less like a ghost tied to a specific location, and more like a predatory archetype, manifesting wherever the conditions are right. Isolation, vulnerability, social anxiety, and the tension of evaluation. She doesn't haunt houses, she hunts interactions, forcing victims into a conversational trap that mirrors the unspoken fear of being judged. And in modern Japan, where politeness is deeply embedded in culture, refusing to answer a direct question feels socially wrong, which makes her rituals psychologically inescapable. Surveillance footage from urban legends posted in the early 2000s often shows blurred female silhouettes, near pedestrian crossings late at night, sometimes appearing in one frame and vanishing in the next without transitional motion, though skeptics attribute this to compression artifacts or editing tricks. Yet believers argue that her speed has always been described as unnatural, not sprinting, but repositioning, as if she moves between attention spans rather than physical space. A lesser-known version of the legend claims that if you attempt to photograph her after she lowers her mask, the image will distort, stretching her smile into an exaggerated crescent across the screen, and several anonymous uploads have surfaced showing glitched faces with elongated mouths, though none have been conclusively verified. What unsettles researchers isn't proof, but consistency, because across decades, regions, and technological eras, the core encounter remains unchanged. The mask, the polite voice, the first question, the reveal, the second question, and the inevitable sense that no answer is correct. Some spiritual practitioners in Japan suggest she is an onru, a vengeful spirit born from deep resentment, but traditional onru are usually bound to a specific grievance or location, whereas Kuchisake-onna appears indiscriminate, targeting strangers without personal connection, which has led to a more disturbing hypothesis that she is not seeking revenge on individuals, but reenacting a trauma endlessly, forcing others to participate in the moment of humiliation and judgment that created her. In this interpretation, every victim becomes part of the original wound. In 2012, a Japanese blogger documented an alleged encounter while walking home after midnight in Saitama, describing a woman who stepped into his path under a flickering street lamp, her mask pristine and white, her posture, to straight her question barely louder than a whisper carried by wind. And when he attempted to bypass her without responding, she mirrored his movement exactly, maintaining equal distance, blocking his path without touching him, repeating the question again and again until he muttered, "Average," out of panic. At which point she tilted her head in a slow, almost mechanical motion and began laughing, not loudly, but with a breathy, rhythmic exhale that did not match human cadence. He claims he blacked out and awoke near his apartment entrance with shallow cuts across his cheeks that healed within days but left faint scars only visible under certain lighting. Medical records of such incidents are scarce, and most alleged victims refuse formal documentation, either out of embarrassment or fear of ridicule, which perpetuates the cycle of unverifiable testimony that folklore thrives on. But cultural anthropologists note that urban legends often persist because they express collective anxieties too uncomfortable to confront directly. And in Japan's case, societal pressure surrounding appearance, conformity, and evaluation remains deeply ingrained. She is the embodiment of that pressure, weaponized into a predator. There is one more disturbing layer rarely discussed outside niche forums: the idea that Kuchisake-onna does not choose victims randomly, but senses insecurity, targeting those who hesitate before answering, those whose self-doubt radiates strongest. And if that theory holds even symbolic truth, then she is less an external entity and more a mirror, turned violent, punishing uncertainty with mutilation. Imagine walking home tonight, streetlights humming, the city quieter than usual, and a masked woman steps forward with that calm, almost polite tone, asking the simplest question imaginable. And in that suspended second before you respond, you feel something far heavier than fear. It's the weight of being measured, judged, reduced to a reaction. And that is when you realize the true horror is not the blade, not the slit smile, not even the chase, but the inevitability of participation. Because once she asks, the story has already claimed you. And whether she was born from jealousy, medical tragedy, psychological projection, or something far older hiding beneath modern streets, one fact remains consistent across every version of the legend: she always waits for your answer, and when you finally speak, she leans closer, as if savoring the sound, as if confirming that you have stepped willingly into a ritual. And somewhere in that pause before she lifts the mask, there is a silence so complete, it feels like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what you will say next. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Warning: urban legends were never meant to go global. For decades, Kuchisake-onna was considered a uniquely Japanese phenomenon, deeply embedded in the cultural anxieties of post-war society, whispered between school children and resurfacing every few years in local news cycles. But something shifted when the internet erased borders, because folklore that once required proximity suddenly required only exposure. And once her story was translated, subtitled, reposted, reacted to, and stitched into viral threads, the sightings began appearing outside Japan, not identical at first, but eerily similar in structure, as if the entity had adapted to a new audience. In South Korea, online forums in the mid-2000s referenced a red mask woman who approached pedestrians at night asking a question about appearance before revealing a mutilated mouth. In parts of China, urban bloggers wrote about a masked female figure near underpasses who moved unnaturally fast between streetlights. Western horror communities began discussing a Glasgow smile woman seen in reflections behind people during late-night live streams. Always slightly out of focus, always partially obscured, always gone when replayed. Skeptics argue this is nothing more than folklore. Migration stories evolve as they travel, but researchers studying mimetic behavior propose a darker possibility, that certain legends act like psychological parasites, attaching to fear patterns within different cultures and reshaping themselves to survive. In Japan, she wore a surgical mask because it blended into daily life in Western countries. She sometimes appears hooded or partially veiled, matching local expectations of concealment, but the core ritual remains unchanged. The approach, the polite tone, the question, the reveal, the second question, the punishment. In 2016, a live streamer walking through an empty subway station in Tokyo claimed a masked woman followed him at a distance visible only in the station's convex security mirrors. Viewers spammed the chat, warning him, but when he turned around directly, no one was there. And when he reviewed the archived footage later, the reflection appeared to lag half a second behind his movements, as though something in the mirrored space moved independently. The clip was widely dismissed as a glitch, yet it gained millions of views before being deleted, without explanation. Paranormal investigators analyzing similar footage often note one recurring anomaly: electronic interference when focusing on female vocal frequencies in recordings associated with alleged sightings. Subtle distortions resembling layered whispers beneath ambient noise, as if two voices overlap slightly out of sync. Audio engineers attribute this to compression artifacts, but believers claim it suggests something speaking beneath the question we hear. And then came the mirror trend. Social media challenges encouraged users to stand alone in dim lighting, look into a mirror, and whisper variations of her question, "Am I beautiful?" Not summoning her by name like Bloody Mary, but invoking the ritual itself, and thousands participated, most experiencing nothing, but a small number reporting fleeting visual distortions, their smile appearing wider for a frame, the lighting around their mouth darkening momentarily, the sensation of someone standing just behind them. Of course, algorithms amplify anomalies, and once one video claims a distortion, others subconsciously mimic it. Yet the psychological spread is undeniable. Folklore experts warn that repetition strengthens urban legends because attention feeds them, embedding the narrative deeper into collective consciousness. And if Kuchisake-onna is indeed an archetype of judgment and disfigurement, then global beauty culture, filtered images, and constant digital evaluation provide fertile ground for her evolution. She no longer needs to stalk empty streets exclusively. She can exist in comments sections and viral edits, in the pause before someone posts a selfie, in the anxiety of awaiting validation. A chilling 2019 account from a foreign exchange student in Canada described encountering a woman in a white mask near a wooded campus path at dusk, who asked in accented English, "Am I beautiful?" And when he nervously laughed and replied, "Sure," she tilted her head and slowly lowered the mask to reveal what he described, not as blood or torn flesh, but shadow where her mouth should have been, a darkness absorbing the light around it. He ran, claiming she appeared ahead of him without crossing the space between, mirroring classic Japanese descriptions. Yet he insisted he had never heard of the legend prior to the encounter, learning about it only afterward through frantic research. Coincidence, suggestion, or migration? Anthropologists studying urban legends note that fear spreads faster in interconnected societies because shared narratives create shared hallucinations. Sexpectation shapes perception, but there is a limit to coincidence when structural details match across continents without direct cultural contact. In remote highways across the American Midwest, truck drivers have posted anonymously about a masked woman standing beside desolate roads at night to still to. Centered in their headlights, never flinching at engine noise, disappearing when passed, but sometimes reappearing in the rearview mirror. One driver claimed she spoke through CB radio static, asking a garbled version of the same question before the transmission cut to silence. Even if 99% of these stories are fabricated, exaggerated, or influenced by prior knowledge, the persistence of the ritual suggests something deeper about human fear. We are terrified of being evaluated, of giving the wrong answer, of failing a test we didn't know we were taking, and that is what makes Kuchisake-onna so adaptably. She does not rely on geography, only interaction. Unlike spirits tied to cursed houses or ancient forests, she requires only a moment of vulnerability and a question that demands response. Some modern occult forums speculate that speaking about her excessively increases the likelihood of encounter, that narrating her story functions as an invitation, which is why certain storytellers refuse to say her name aloud after dark, referring to her only as the woman with the slit mouth, believing specificity strengthens manifestation. Whether supernatural or psychological, the pattern is clear. As technology advanced, she advanced with it. As society became more image-obsessed, her question gained sharper relevance. As global communication accelerated, her sightings diversified geographically while maintaining structural consistency. And here is the most disturbing evolution documented in recent years. Reports where she does not wait for the first answer. Instead, she immediately lowers the mask and asks only the second question, as though skipping the test and proceeding directly to correction, implying she has grown impatient, or perhaps stronger. If that progression continues, the ritual may simplify further until no answer is required at all. Imagine that: no question, no choice, only revelation. In folklore theory, entities that evolve beyond their original rules often become something else entirely, shedding the constraints that once defined them. And, if Kuchisake-onna has truly left Japan, not geographically, but conceptually, then she is no longer bound to masked anonymity, or even to night streets. She could manifest in any reflective surface, any paused frame, any moment where someone hesitates before judging or being judged. The global spread does not prove her existence, but it proves her survival. And survival, in folklore, is power. Because every retelling strengthens the archetype, every reaction video fuels the narrative, every whispered dare adds another layer of cultural reinforcement. So if you ever find yourself alone under artificial light, street lamp, bathroom, bulb, phone, screen, glow, and you sense someone just outside your direct line of sight, and a voice that sounds almost polite asks the simplest question imaginable, remember this: she is no longer confined to one country, one era, or one interpretation. She adapted, she migrated, and now the only border she needs to cross is your attention. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Have you ever wondered what you would do if faced with a question where every answer could mean your end? In the sprawling landscape of Japanese urban legends, few tales are as chillingly interactive as that of the Kuchisake-onna, the slit-mouthed woman. This isn't just a story told around a campfire. It's a participatory ritual, a deadly game of wits where your survival hangs on a single, carefully chosen word. Her legend has transcended mere folklore, becoming a terrifying specter that once brought an entire nation to a standstill. Tonight we journey into the shadows to uncover the truth behind the woman who asks a question you can't afford to answer wrong. Who is she? Where did she come from? The origins of the Kuchisake-onna are shrouded in mystery, with multiple tales competing to explain her grotesque appearance and murderous intent. one of the most popular versions, dates back to the Heian period. It tells of a samurai's beautiful but vain wife. Suspecting her of infidelity, the samurai, in a fit of jealous rage, took his sword and sliced her mouth from ear to ear, screaming, "Who will think you're beautiful now?" Cursed for her perceived transgression, her vengeful spirit, or Onru, now roams the earth, forever concealed behind a surgical mask, a fan, or a scarf. Another, more modern origin story, places the blame on a failed medical procedure. In this telling, a routine dental or cosmetic surgery goes horribly wrong. The anesthetic fails, or the surgeon's hand slips, leaving the woman with a permanent, gruesome smile. Overcome with grief and rage at her disfigurement, she returns from the grave to inflict her pain upon others. A third version suggests she was the victim of a jealous rival who, envious of her beauty, attacked her with a blade, disfiguring her face and leaving her to die. Whatever her origin, the result is the same: a malevolent entity consumed by a singular, terrifying purpose. The encounter itself is the heart of the legend, a masterclass in psychological horror. She appears at night, often to lone travelers, children walking home from school, or university students studying late. She approaches, her face hidden, and poses a deceptively simple question: "Watashi, kairei, am I pretty?" This is the critical moment, the first move in her deadly game. If you answer no, your fate is sealed. She will kill you instantly, often with the very weapon that disfigured her: a pair of scissors, a sickle, or a knife. A swift, brutal end for your honesty. But what if you say yes? This is where her true cruelty is revealed. Answering in the affirmative will only prolong your suffering. She will slowly lower her mask, revealing her horrifying slit mouth, held open in a bloody, permanent grin. Then, she will ask a second question: "Kori demo? What about now?" Or, even like this: "Now you're trapped." If you scream, change your answer to no, or show any sign of fear, she will cut you down. If you remain steadfast and answer yes again, she will take her weapon and slice your own mouth from ear to ear, mirroring her own disfigurement, so that you too can share in her grotesque beauty. There is no right answer, no easy escape. Every path seems to lead to a violent, horrifying conclusion. This wasn't just a story. In the late 1970s, the legend of the Kuchisake-onna ignited a very real panic across Japan. It started with rumors in Gifu Prefecture in 1978 and quickly spread like wildfire. Reports flooded in of sightings of a woman matching her description. Fear gripped communities. Schools began sending children home in groups, escorted by teachers or parents. Police patrols were increased in many neighborhoods, specifically looking for this spectral figure. The media frenzy amplified the hysteria, turning a piece of folklore into a tangible, nationwide threat. The panic demonstrated the immense power of a story, how a shared belief can shape reality and incite mass fear on an unprecedented scale. So, is an encounter with the slit-mouthed woman a guaranteed death sentence? Over the years, as the legend evolved, so too did the supposed methods for survival. These rules became as much a part of the lore as the questions themselves. The key, it seems, lies in confusion and ambiguity. One of the most common strategies is to give a non-committal answer to our first question. Instead of a simple yes or no, you should reply, "You're average," or so. This supposedly perplexes her, giving you a precious few seconds to escape while she processes the unexpected response. Another popular survival tactic involves specific words. Some claim that chanting the word pomade 3 times will repel her. The logic is that the scent of the hairstyling product either reminds her of the doctor who disfigured her, or that she is allergic to it. A more direct approach is to offer her something she desires more than your life. One story suggests throwing hard candy, or beko aim, on the ground. She will supposedly be compelled to stop and pick up each piece, buying you valuable time to run. Similarly, offering her fruit or money might distract her long enough for you to get away. These survival guides transform the encounter from a simple horror story into a complex puzzle, a test of quick thinking under extreme pressure. But what does the endurance of this legend tell us about ourselves? Psychologically, the Kuchisake-onna taps into a deep-seated fear of the uncanny valley, the unsettling feeling we get from something that looks almost human, but not quite. Her masked face is normal, but the horror it conceals is monstrous. She represents the terrifying idea that danger can hide behind a mundane, everyday facade. Sociologically, the legend can be seen as a cautionary tale. In some interpretations, she is a warning against vanity and infidelity. In others, particularly during the 1970s panic, she embodied adult anxieties about the safety of children and the hidden dangers of modern urban life. She is a cultural mirror, reflecting the fears and social pressures of the time. The changing nature of her origin story, from a samurai's wife to a victim of modern medicine, shows how these legends adapt to stay relevant to contemporary anxieties. In the end, whether the Kuchisake-onna is a vengeful spirit, a psychological projection, or simply a story that got out of hand, her power is undeniable. She exists in the space between belief and disbelief. In the chilling pause after she asks her question, she reminds us that some of the most terrifying monsters are not those that hide in the dark, but those that walk among us, hiding their true nature behind a mask. Her legend persists because it plays on a fundamental human fear, the fear of the unknown, and the terrifying realization that sometimes there are no right answers. She is the whisper on a dark street, the question you hope you never have to hear, and a chilling testament to the idea that a story, once told, can take on a life of its own. Thanks for watching.